Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. This is your daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tom Orr, and today I'm joined by Tony Gerdeman. He's the lead beat writer for Buckeye Scoop. Based on some feedback we've gotten, you guys are looking for more on-the-field football content, so this is a show just about actual on-the-field football content. You're welcome. This week's Tony season preview series continued with a look at one of the most interesting position groups on the 2020 Ohio State Buckeyes, the cornerbacks. Jeff Okudah, Damon Arnett gone. Shaun Wade is back. Sevyn Banks and Cameron Brown are kind of next in line to be starters. But as Tony was putting together this depth chart, there were a ton of names on there. Tony, to you, is this maybe the position group with the most question marks on the team this season?
I think it's the most oars on a depth chart that you'll find because you just don't know where everybody lines up. And you haven't seen enough from everybody to know if they're ready to be part of the depth chart. So there's a ton of questions. Starting off with, you lose 2 first-round draft picks. And nobody that loses 2 first-round draft picks is going to be the better for it. But I also don't know how many schools are better equipped right now than Ohio State is to handle that loss. And starting with Shaun Wade is certainly that's ahead of the curve right there.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, there were a lot of questions, but Shaun Wade definitely is not one of them. He moves outside this year, but seems like probably a very likely first-team all-conference player at the least, and possibly more than that. Is that kind of your read on where his season could be trending?
Yeah, I mean, you're already seeing him on first-team All-American preseason lists, and I know he came back because he wants to show that he can play outside corner. I don't think anybody doubts it, and you watch him do it this year. That'll improve his draft stock, but I wonder how much it's going to – you can't say adversely affect or negatively affect the defense because he's still going to be out there. But he was so good in the slot last year, and now you're asking somebody to be that good or be good enough. And so I wonder how much of robbing Peter to pay Paul there is here with this. And I understand part of him coming back was Ohio State telling him you can play outside this year. But I still – he was really good there, and we saw what the defense looked like when he wasn't there. And they're going to need to be better than that this year when he's outside. So it's strange to move somebody from somewhere they played really, really well and played about as well as anybody could have. But the expectation is that he's going to be Jeff Okudah. He's going to be Denzel Ward. He's going to be, all of these guys, all of these first-round draft picks outside. So, yeah, okay, go eliminate one half of the field. I guess that's okay.
Seems like that would be an acceptable result for this year's defense. As we're talking about these guys, it's almost less a depth chart and more just kind of like levels of guys or tiers of guys. It's like you've got Shaun Wade at the top, the next level down, and guys who potentially have the opportunity to move up to that Shaun Wade level. To me, maybe Sevyn Banks and Cam Brown, both of them are guys who would be first-team starters but have a decent amount of experience from last year. They saw a lot of meaningful snaps last year. What's a reasonable expectation for them this season?
Yeah, that is the next tier. I expect them to be Ohio State cornerbacks, to be quality starting corners. And this is their 3rd year on campus. Neither one of them redshirted as freshmen, even though they both missed half the season with injuries. I think Cameron Brown played the first half of the season. Sevyn Banks played the second half of the season in 2018. Then they both had their moments last year stepping up when somebody would go down. So now this is year 3. And by year 3, this is for a lot of guys, this is their money year. And so I would expect both of them to be good enough to start at Ohio State this year. And in my cornerbacks preview, I think my one bold prediction was that Shaun Wade wouldn't be the only cornerback leaving early this year. And is that Cameron Brown or is it Sevyn Banks? I don't know who's going to win that job, but I think whoever does is probably a fairly good candidate to then also leave early for the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a pretty established pattern for guys. You have the first year you're kind of mostly watching, the second year you're a contributor, the third year you're a starter, and if you're a starting Ohio State cornerback, then you go get drafted in the first or second round of the NFL draft, and then the cycle starts anew with the guys who were getting some playing time the year before. So, yeah, whichever one of the guys who doesn't turn pro after this year becomes next year Shaun Wade potentially. I mean, that is just how things have worked in that cornerback room for a long time, and seems like it's working pretty well. Another thing that has worked pretty well for a number of years there is that 3 cornerback rotation that they have liked to run. I mean, that was a Kerry Coombs thing. It continued with Jeff Hafley. I mean, and now Kerry Coombs is back again. Do you see those 3 being a 3-corner rotation that the Buckeyes like to do? Or does one of them have to slide inside and play the slot? And if they do, does that then potentially kill the idea of that rotation?
That, for me, that's the $1,000,000 question of the defense in terms of the alignment. Because if we assume the loser of the job opposite Shaun Wade, if the Cameron Brown, Sevyn Banks, quote unquote, loser of that battle to be outside, then moves inside, I don't think you can rotate those 3, or else there's no sense in you're not keeping anybody fresh by rotating them around. So I think that would eliminate the 3 cornerback rotation unless somebody else steps up. But then we don't know that, like, maybe it's not about being the loser of the outside job. Maybe it's whoever is the best on the inside, aside from Shaun Wade. Because that's such an important position, especially now in the Big Ten with all of the spread offenses and the way you can key on guys and find mismatches. If the guy defending the slot is not a mismatch, then your defense is all the better for it. And we saw that last year. So maybe I also think there's not the negative connotation with being a slot corner that there used to be. Like, you can't go to Cameron Brown and be like, "No, Cam, we know you came here. First of all, you came here to be a wide receiver. Let's not forget about that. But then we were going to make you an outside corner, and eventually you'll be a first rounder. But this year we'd like you to play inside." And in the past, maybe you guys would be like, "Yeah, it's not really what I want. I want to be outside." But Shaun Wade has shown them like what that could be. I mean, Von Bell, Kerry Coombs would always call him a slot corner when he was playing in the defense for the Buckeyes back in 2013, 2014. And those years when he was playing that safety spot. But obviously this is a little bit different, but I wouldn't say it's almost a glamour position up there with any other cornerback spot right now. And certainly it doesn't limit the NFL is going to see you. It doesn't limit like your ability to be seen. So maybe it's not going to be the loser of Sevyn Banks and Cameron Brown. Maybe it's just the best guy who can do it. And maybe that's not Sevyn Banks or Cameron Brown.
Yeah, and that's sort of the next question is, some of the other names that we've talked about before who could end up making a big difference if one of them is potentially ready to make that next step up to be in that, if they don't have to be starters, they don't have to be All-American, but if they can just be in that rotation, be the next guy who a year from now we're talking about as the next guy who could be a first rounder a year from now. Marcus Williamson is one. Marcus Williamson, obviously senior, so he's not a next year guy, but he's someone who's just had a ton of injuries. Maybe he can be that slot corner guy. Tyreek Johnson came as a 5-star prospect, has not gotten on the field a lot. He's someone that we had talked about really, really looking forward to seeing in the spring, because it felt like this is the time that if it's going to happen for Tyreek Johnson, this is the time it's going to happen. And then spring ball didn't happen. So, you're sort of pushing that back to summer/fall camp now. So, is this the time it happens for Tyreek Johnson? Even someone like Marcus Hooker, who maybe is sort of in that Von Bell mold, like you talked about, where, yeah, I mean, it's a safety, but you can play him as a slot corner potentially too. He's someone that I think maybe popped a little bit. I mean, we got to watch exactly one spring practice, but he's someone I remember walking out of there and thinking like, oh, Marcus Hooker, like maybe this is happening for Marcus Hooker now. So what are the odds that maybe one of those 3 guys ends up at least in that rotation this fall?
I think they would love for that to happen, because that would open up the 3-man rotation outside. But I guess you have to go with your 3 best, though, unless one of these guys can work their way into it. I think Marcus Hooker might be a guy to watch there, because, as you said, like, he flashed. We know he's a very good athlete. He's got the bloodlines for sure, with his brother being Malik Hooker. He's not so big that he can't handle the slot. He's, like a 5'11", 200-pound guy who can move. Not necessarily a cornerback, but Amir Reep played it last year where he was moved to safety and then had moved back to corner. So there's a history of guys who fit different molds playing that spot. We even saw Bryson Shaw there in the spring, and he's a 6'2", 190-pound safety playing there. if Marcus Williamson could do it, that would be great. If Tyreek Johnson could do it, that would probably be even greater because you get another year out of him and he starts to realize this potential or potentially 2 more years out of him. I don't know how much I expect that to happen. I can see it, but I don't know that I expect it, you know?
Yeah. And I know exactly what you mean. I mean, you're asking guys to take a pretty big leap there. And, the track record at Ohio State suggests that it is probably going to happen for someone, but I'm not so confident that I would be willing to bet on this is the guy who's going to have that happen this year. A few other names that could slot in there somewhere, either as that slot corner or maybe a second safety spot. Bryson Shaw, who you mentioned, Ronnie Hickman, who came in with a lot of hype but missed all of last year rehabbing from a knee injury. Either of them as a potential answer somewhere. I mean, slot corner, the second safety spot next to Josh Proctor, maybe. I mean, any sense for them? And this is an extremely unfair question because we saw one practice of Bryson Shaw in the slot, and Ronnie Hickman was sort of limited in our one practice. But since it's my show, I can ask you the unfair question. Tony, what do you think?
I don't know, Tom. What do you think? No, I think Ronnie Hickman. I was surprised to see Bryson Shaw there because you view him as like this lacrosse player with range and all of that stuff. But to see him there, where you're thinking more of the tight spaces and stuff, but that is also lacrosse, where you're not just you got to make tight cuts and you got to be quick and things like that. So maybe that fits. Plus, he can help out in the run game. Ronnie Hickman, I think, is a sneaky answer here. We didn't see anything from him last year because of the ACL. Really good athlete, good size. That's another reason why, that spot is so tough to fill and why Shaun Wade was so good at it. And they could ask him to do everything. Maybe this year they only ask certain things of that spot until they get more confidence in it. And that's, the safety position with Josh Proctor being able to hold up on the back end is one huge question. What they're going to do at the slot corner is the other huge question for this defense. I think those are the only real two questions that are super serious.
Yeah, and you may end up with a spot where no one can do everything that Shaun Wade could do. So you need two different guys to kind of work together and sort of end up accomplishing what Shaun Wade was able to do by himself last year. I mean, he was discussed as the Swiss Army knife of the defense. So sometimes you need a separate pocket knife and a can opener. Like that's and there is a pocket knife and a can opener in that in that defensive back roster somewhere, and it's just a matter of kind of finding who those guys are. Finally, the two true freshman corners, Legend Cavazos and Ryan Watts. Obviously, not. Let's set the expectation. It is not fair to expect true freshmen to be starters or play any meaningful minutes at corner. There are exceptions, but even the wild best case scenario kind of exceptions, like Jeff Okudah was a starter and was just okay at the very end of the freshman year, against USC in that Cotton Bowl. And it was remarkable that he was okay. That was like, wow, that was really impressive that he was just okay. So probably not guys who are going to be starters this year, but any sense for one of them maybe could be someone who is playing and looking okay in kind of the second half of blowout kind of minutes. Either of those guys jump out to you?
They both do, because in the one practice that we got to see, they both did some things. Ryan Watts had an interception. Legend Cavazos was working in the slot. I think he is maybe the ideal person for that, but not as a true freshman. I think that's asking way too much of somebody. Daxton Hill at Michigan did a little bit of the slot corner nickelback type of thing, but this is a bit different than that. I think he'll eventually get there, and I think he's the kind of athlete that can handle it. Ryan Watts, I mean, you saw him, Tom. When you watch him on the field, he stands out. For one, he's legitimately 6'3" and 200 pounds and just bigger than everybody else. But he was also really good in coverage, and like I said, came away with an interception. I think the guys in front of him, the Tyreek Johnson and Marcus Williamson, and those guys have their work cut out for them to keep the freshmen from moving past them. And It's too bad that the spring got cut short because they were already, making waves and impressing people. And I wouldn't be surprised to see either of them do something similar to what Cameron Brown and Sevyn Banks did last year in their reserve roles, who were then called upon to, start a half here or start a game there because of injuries.
Yeah, Ryan Watts was someone who looked to me like the kind of guy you would match, not this year, please don't do this year, but a year from now, match up on the like Nico Collins type outside, big, tall outside receivers. He's got the size to do that. And Cavazos is just such a freakish athlete. Like you would see that at all those camps. You'd see it in the testing numbers. We saw it, I think, at the practice. He's just such a good athlete. He's so quick and such a big jumper that, I mean, like all the pieces are there. Like you said earlier, like this is what Kerry Coombs looks for. This is like he's got those pieces there. He's got these guys that, if they follow the typical Ohio State development track, they are going to be something pretty solid in a couple of years. A lot of the questions this year, I think, stem not only from the loss of Jeff Okudah and Damon Arnett, like we talked about, also safety Jordan Fuller, but also Jeff Hafley, where Jeff Hafley was running that one high look that Ryan Day really likes, and that was so effective last year. We don't know what Kerry Coombs is going to be like as a defensive coordinator. I think we know what he is as a position coach. We definitely know what he is as a recruiter. We know what he's like as an interview subject. All of those things are incredible. What is he like as a defensive coordinator? That's sort of a question. And we don't know whether they're going to have the personnel to stick with that one high look like they did a lot last year. That obviously could impact how the defense lines up in terms of having a slot corner versus having two safeties. My thought right now is this maybe ends up as more of a hybrid of some one high, more too high than they ran last year, but not totally just too high. Am I in the right track there? Is that kind of where you are in your thinking right now in terms of where they play this fall?
Yeah, that's where I am as well. I think the amount of too high would maybe be a begrudging thing that they would be allowing. But if you don't have the guy who can handle the one high, then you can't do that. But I think Josh Proctor will probably be okay. But we already know they're going to do more two safety looks. But as Ryan Day keeps saying, this is a one high defense, and this is what they're going to do. This is what he wants. That's one of the reasons he went out and got Jeff Hafley, because he specifically wanted this defense. So I don't think you put the defense that you want on the field. It is statistically the best defense in the nation, and then in year two, you're like, let's scrap it. Let's do something completely different, or let's do less of what worked. You're going to have to do what your personnel can do, what they allow you to do. I still think the hope is to do as much one high as possible, but changing it up with some of what Kerry Coombs wants to bring. And plus, this is the second year that offenses will be able to see that Ohio State defense. You can't just keep giving them the same thing. You're going to have to change it up a little bit, do some different things, and see how it goes. And you brought in Kerry Coombs for a reason. You got to let him do what he wants. But Ryan Day is still a head coach, so everybody still does what Ryan Day wants, but he also gives them the leeway to go ahead and put your touches on these things.
Well, Tony, thank you for joining us this morning. You can find all of Tony's positional preview stories, including the corners, at BuckeyeScoop.com. Those are all free content, so go check those out and get a feel for what the site has to offer. And then consider signing up for a membership. There's even more information and detail inside our members section, both intel on this year's team, as well as some real inside information about recruiting in football and basketball. Give it a shot for a month. It is the price of a pizza, and not a particularly great pizza. So based on the feedback we've gotten from those who've already signed up, there is a very, very, very strong chance that if you give it a shot, you're going to love it. So go to BuckeyeScoop.com, check out the free content, consider signing up for a membership, and thank you guys for listening. Have a great day, and we will talk to you tomorrow.